let me just start by introducing Jim Rogers. I think everybody on this call knows who he is. That's why all the people joined in to listen to Jim. He was one of the co-managers at the Quantum Fund, had a very, very successful track record there. He's done 2 round-the-world investment trips. I think he'll have some stories from that to share. And I think everybody knows the story. There's an awful lot we could say about it. I've known Jim for, if I may call you Jim, I've known you for, gosh, since the early 80s, a long time in New York and even before your round the world trip. And I was going to ask you how your 2 little girls are, but when I looked on the internet and saw pictures, I mean, these are young ladies. And I must say, Jim, they are, if you can believe what's on the internet, they're very, obviously very beautiful, but they're very accomplished, very poised. And frankly, Jim, if you did nothing else in your entire life, raising those 2 girls would be your highest achievement. So how is the family, by the way? Is it good?
Well, first of all, Adrian, it's a delight to see you. I mean, I can see it's the real Adrian Day. Wow. I haven't seen you in a long time, as you know. Fabulous. You look the same. You're still the same Adrian Day. I can see that. And I don't know why you can't see me. I do this all the time, and it always works. So I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do except keep talking, which I will do. But my daughters are great, Adrian. You are right. For many years, I was against children. I felt sorry for people who had children. Oh my gosh, I was never going to do something so foolish. But then I had one. I had my first child when I was 60, and I will tell you, I learned that I was wrong. If there's anybody watching who hasn't had children and they're old enough, I suggest you do it. It's a lot of fun. These girls have been great for me. Certainly changed my outlook on many things, including children. And I will tell you, Adrian, they're making me famous. I was going through immigration in Shanghai the other day, and the immigration officer said to me, "Oh, you're Jim Rogers. Your girls are great." I said, "What? What about me? I used to be great." So my girls are making me famous, certainly all over Asia, and it's a lot of fun. And it's a delight to see you again. And hello, Rich. It's nice to see you. Here I am. I'm happy to do whatever you want to do, except I don't know how to make it so that I can see, or you can see me. I don't know what to do.
Well, I'll take the blame for that one, Jim. I'm so happy you joined us. Been looking forward to this interview for some time. Obviously, you're incredibly accomplished, and we want to tap into a little bit of that experience for our listeners here today. I'll take the blame for this. Apparently, we got you the wrong link. The good news is we can hear you. And we know that is the real Jim Rogers as well. I don't need a face to back that up, and we look forward to a great conversation tonight.
Listen, the first question, let me start with a sort of big picture question, if I may, and just give us a little bit of sense of how you're viewing the macro world right now, particularly economics and investments, of course, but what's your big macro view? And then maybe come down a little bit and tell us where you're seeing, investment opportunities on the ground at the moment.
Well, that's a wonderful question, Rich. I should ask you and Rich. You're more smarter than I am, so more accomplished than I am. As I see the world, we have had the longest period of prosperity and a bull market, stocks since in American history since 2009. America's never had such a long period before. Maybe it's going to go on 50 years. Who knows? But it never has. So historically, we're coming to the end of a period of prosperity. I'm beginning to see signs of excess and of problems, inflation, et cetera, et cetera. I am not selling short yet. I have raised a lot of cash, and my cash is in US dollars, by the way. The US dollar is a terribly, terribly flawed currency, and it's unfortunately for all Americans, including me, it's coming to an end of its reign. Many currencies have been on top in history, but none have lasted more than 100, 150 years. So I'm afraid that the U.S. is coming to an end. Many people are looking now for an alternative to the dollar. And unfortunately, Washington is pushing them in that way. You know, Washington, an international currency is supposed to be neutral. Anybody can use it for anything. But now, if Washington doesn't like you, they cut you off. So many people, including our friends, are starting to say, wait a minute, they can do this to us too. So now many people are looking for an alternative, a competitor. I don't like saying it, but I have to deal with facts. I do own a lot of dollars because in times of turmoil, which I see coming in the foreseeable future, people move to the US dollar as a safe haven. It's not safe, but people think it is. So I expect the dollar to have at least one more big move up. I hope if it does, I hope I'm smart enough to sell it. The question is, Adrian, what do I do then? I don't see any alternative currencies. In theory, it should be the Chinese currency, but it's not convertible. So obviously, you cannot have an international currency that's not fully convertible.
Right.
So I am in a bind. I don't know which currency is out there to replace or to compete with the US dollar, but I know I have to find it, and I have to find it fairly soon. So that's how I see the world.
I thought you made a little bit of your money in currency trading back in the
Well, no,
70s.
of course I've made money in many things in my day and lost money in many things. I've lost lots of money. Probably lost money both you put together in various times in my life. Yes, but I know that there are currencies out there, but I'm talking about what will replace or compete with the US dollar, and I don't see it yet. Cannot be the euro. I don't see it.
Tend to agree with you. I don't think it's out there. So, people talk about, gold or the dollars going away. The big issue is exactly what you just stated, Jim, that, what are we going to replace it with? There is nothing out there that has the liquidity, that has, the reach, that has the power of the dollar, nothing even close. So we may be killing our currency, but we're gonna work off that corpse for a while because there's nothing else to go to.
Right.
Well, that's an extreme. That's my point exactly. Maybe the two of you will come up with it and let us know. I don't
Gold?
see it yet.
Gold, but it's not as liquid.
Well, gold, yeah, gold has many uses, and I own gold. I own silver, but I don't see the world jumping into a new gold standard yet. I mean, maybe if we have a sudden disaster, people will not have anything else except gold or silver to use. But even if that happens, that will lead to problems too. I mean, gold has been used many times in history. It has never worked long term. It always has problems. And the main problem of gold is it requires discipline. Well,
Yeah.
politicians don't like discipline. Politicians like to find a way to get around discipline, and they always have.
Yeah, good
Yeah.
point.
Let me ask you one thing, if I may. You've been a big advocate of investing in China for many years, and I'm just wondering if your thinking has evolved in the last year or two, and how you're seeing China positioned right now. Would you invest in Chinese stocks right now if you were new to investing?
Well, I own Chinese shares, and I have for 30 years or something. I don't plan to sell them. My view of China is that someday, in 50 years or so, my daughters are going to say, he must have been smart. Look at all these Chinese shares we have. Guys, we're rich. America became the most successful country in the 20th century. But you well know, Adrian, that along the way, we had many serious problems. We had Civil War, depression, bankruptcy, who knows what we had. We had everything. And yet, we became the most successful country in the world. That's my view of China too, but that doesn't mean there won't be bear markets along the way. We had some horrendous bear markets in the United States. But if you'd sold your American shares in, say, 1924, you would have looked pretty foolish in 50 years. So that's That's my view of China.
Yeah.
I own Chinese shares. I'm looking for more, but it's not the end all and be all for me. I will probably survive even if China disappears from the world. I hope I will survive.
In terms of, let's say, an investor who has just come into some money, or, not someone like you or me, or, you've got more money than I have, and I've been around as long as you have, but someone maybe just looking at investing an inheritance today. Do you think Chinese stocks should be bought today, or are you waiting on that? Would you wait on that?
Well, Adrian, if you can't find China on a map, please don't invest in China. If you know nothing about China, please don't listen to some guy on the internet and invest in China. To be a successful investor, you only invest in what you yourself know a lot about. Don't listen to hot tips. In fact, hot tips will ruin you. So yes, I just said China is going to be the next great country in the world. But if you don't know about it, learn about it before you invest. Please learn a lot about it. Learn about anything. To be successful, you invest in what you know a lot about. Now, Adrian, people say to me sometime when I tell them that, they say, but that's boring. And I tell them, if you want to be successful, be boring. Be boring in your investments, and you'll be very successful.
Yeah.
If I could follow up on that, Jim, one of the things that I was taught early on is don't invest in a country where there's no rule of law. And not saying that there's no rule of law in China, but are investors truly protected? And is that a risk worth taking? Obviously, you're taking that risk. But what is your advice for somebody new to China, how to protect themselves as investors and potentially not seeing their investments just disappear or become, absorbed by the state, if you will?
But Rich, I've been around longer than you. I thought you were going to say the United States, where there's no rule of law.
That's a good point. We're going to get to that.
They change the rules all the time. If Washington doesn't like the rules, they change the rules and say, "Oh, this is for your own good. We're making this change. It's for your good." So that's a risk everywhere, at least in my investing experience and what I've read about the world. Sure, there's always that risk in China or anywhere else. And there's also the risk that you might own a country and a war breaks out, such as Russia. I own Russian shares. I hope I own Russian shares. For all I know, they're being confiscated. But there are always risks, all kinds of risks, wherever you are, including war, or including changing the rules, etc. But I guess, well, I don't know any way around that. As I said, you can invest in the United States and they'll change the rules on you. And there's not much you can do if they change the rules. If you know a country where there's stable rule of law and no risk of that changing, or a war or something, hooray, put your money there, especially in that currency.
Well, Jim, you talked about investing in things and of course, many of the best investors in the world, and it could be Peter Lynch or whatever, they've all had that same mantra that you invest in things you know. You, of course, took that to an extreme with your 2 round-the-world trips, which, whatever adventures you had, I think investment opportunities was definitely one of your aims in taking those trips. And not everybody, of course, can do that. How important is it, do you think, to actually, if you're investing in, let's call them emerging economies, how important is it, do you think, for someone to actually go there and visit?
Well, clearly, the best way to learn about something is close to the ground. I mean, if you can see it with your own eyes and touch it, I still make mistakes, but that helps me to clarify what's actually happening and helps me learn what's happening in a country. But Adrian, that's not the simple answer. That's not going to make you rich. Yeah, I make many, many mistakes, and everybody will make many mistakes, but it does certainly help you. The same as if you invest in Microsoft, if you have the programs and if you see how it works, you know a lot more about the company. If you know the product, the same as if you invest in country X, the more you know, the better. But I wish it were that easy. We'd all be rich. Wouldn't it be wonderful if it were easy?
Well,
I would even settle for luck. Gosh, I wish I'd had good luck in my life.
I think you were you in the first edition of what was it called? Investment Masters,
But I wrote a book called Investment Biker, which was about going.
No, the book on different investors. I think it was called Investment Masters. But
There
the
was
interesting thing about that book
Money Masters.
Yeah, Money
There was
Masters.
one called John Train wrote Money Masters.
Yeah. But the interesting thing to me about that book was that there were many different investors with completely different approaches to investing. What do you draw anything from that?
Well, no, one of the things I have learned just from my own experience is that there are many ways to make money. I once worked for Roy Newberg. You may remember him, Newberg of Berman. He was a fantastic trader. I mean, he knew almost every tick in only 50 companies on the stock exchange, but he knew every tick in IBM. He knew every tick in General Motors. I don't know how he did it. He would sit there reading the newspaper, and then suddenly he would say, "Oh, there are 50,000 shares of IBM for sale on the floor. Buy them for me." I was astonished. He had this sixth sense of trading sense, and I have known people like that. Now, I'm the worst trader in the world, the worst short-term trader in the world, but Roy Newberg was a genius at it. So I have learned that there are many ways to make money, many ways to lose money. But if you stay with what you know, and Roy knew as I say, he knew every tick in about 50 stocks, and that's all he did. And he was phenomenal at it and made a lot of money. So figure out what you're good at, figure out what you're bad at, and then do it. And you will probably be successful. You can try to copy other people, but if it's not yours.
We're not looking for hot tips on the internet. That's not a good way of making money. But when you look around the world today, are there opportunities, are there countries that you see that you think are worth a closer look today?
Well, Adrian, as I look around the world, most assets are overpriced or even in a bubble. If you look at bonds, that's certainly a bubble. I cannot think of any country where there are bonds that I would buy that are steel. If you look at property, in many countries, bubbles are forming because of interest rates. If you look at stocks, many countries are forming bubbles. I mean, Uzbekistan is not a bubble. I've been buying shares in Uzbekistan, but there are very, very few countries right now that I see where there are good investments in stocks. Commodities are the only asset that I know that's still cheap. I mean, silver is down 60% from its all-time high. Sugar is down dramatically. I mean, these are not bubble prices if you look at most commodities. But that's the only place that I see things that aren't too expensive. And so as a result, partly as a result, I have a lot of US dollar cash and have US dollars because, as I say, most people think it's a safe haven. It's not, but people think it is. So my dollars in US, my cash is in US dollars.
Yeah, well, people look for liquidity when they look for safe havens, so that's why they look to precious metals or they look to the U.S. dollar for sure. I want to get back. I know we talked a little bit of you're holding a lot of U.S. dollars. There was a question on the side here. I just want to share it with you because Adrian and I were talking about this from the start, and he says, "Can anybody comment about the alleged economic soft landing the pundits claim we are experiencing? Isn't really the fact that U.S. government has now picked up quantitative easing with all these new trillion-dollar deficits they're running now almost every 4 months? This is frightening. Are we beyond the point of no return?" So before you answer, Jim, I want to throw in here the comments from Janet Yellen this past Friday. Did everybody pick up on this on the CNN interview that Bloomberg picked up? She basically said, what we're seeing now, I think we can describe as a soft landing, and my hope is that it will continue. That's a quote. She goes on to say, quote, wage increases are running over price increases now. American workers are getting ahead, and the progress for middle income families is very noticeable.
Hmm.
She actually said this in public. And I just wanted to get your comments on that. Do you think we're in a soft landing? Because you can tell the way I asked the question, I don't think so.
Well, Rich, Janet Yellen has degrees from two fancy Ivy League universities. So
Smarter
who
person
am
than I
I?
am, apparently, but I'm not picking up on this.
But again, how can I argue with two Ivy League university degrees? I think Anna Yellen has no clue what she's talking about and never has. She's been around a long time, as you know. So no, I don't think she knows at all what she's talking about. She is part of the reason that we're in trouble now. I can think the U.S. is in trouble. The U.S. is the largest debtor nation in the history of the world. I don't say that lightly. I'm a U.S. citizen. But no nation in world history has ever been as deeply in debt as we are. And the debt gets worse every day, every hour. Look out the window, the debt's catching up with you fast. So, no, I don't think we're in good shape. Maybe we're not in a deep recession right now. She's right to that extent. But soft landing, I've heard that term many, many decades.
Yeah,
I've never
we've seen
seen one.
Yeah, we've
No,
seen
I'm just
slowing
saying
economic
I've
growth.
I've,
I
I've
guess
seen people talk about soft landings, but they're very, very few if they've happened.
Wow.
Yeah, so my contention is, they've lost touch, and I think Adrian and I discussed this before we jumped on tonight. They've kind of lost touch with reality. I'm not seeing American families doing well right now. I'm seeing them not make ends meet and run up their credit cards, is what I'm seeing. Maybe I'm missing the point. So, I know we're holding dollars. I know the world is losing favor of the dollar. We're having trouble selling our debt at auctions, and I don't blame them. And I'm an American patriot. Don't get me wrong, but I don't have a lot of faith in the dollar long term or the way it's being handled right now. And it doesn't seem that Congress cares. Nobody has an appetite for balancing this budget, and therefore, over time, my guess is we're going to see even bigger bubbles when they get through this phase of pausing, because they're going to have to. They're going to pivot and they're going to inflate the currency further. Do you see any other alternative to that?
Well, I hope you will spread that word because that is what's happening. You say that Congress doesn't care. I don't think Congress has a clue. They don't know what's going on. I'm sure if you went to some of the congressmen and said, "Oh, the United States is the largest debtor in world history," they would say, "It doesn't matter. Who cares?" We're the United States. We're unique. Yeah, we are unique. We're the largest debtor in world history. That's unique. No, I don't see that they understand or care. They think that this is going to be okay. It always has been okay, and don't worry. Well, maybe I'm not as smart as they are, but I worry.
Okay, and I'm with you there. Adrian, any thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, just let's pursue this thing about the currency a little bit because, I think we all agree, and you mentioned, Jim, there's no obvious alternative at the moment. And that's true. But let's look ahead, say 10 years, 15 years. I mean, let's just explore what could happen. I mean, do you get any? We've got a question here about the BRICS adopting a gold-backed currency at some point. Is that a possible alternative? I mean, I'm a historian by training. I don't know if you know that. I did British history, and when Britain was top dog, it was very, very obvious to everyone, including the Brits, that USA was overtaking us. It was very, very clear that the USA was, let's say in 1945 in particular, USA was clearly the world's most powerful military, the world's largest economy, and politically had the most clout in the world. So it was very obvious that the US dollar was going to replace the British pound. And Britain, maybe reluctantly, but we accepted it. And because obviously the two countries were friendly, it was done without a war. It was done, the transition was done peacefully, other than Suez, of course, in 1956. But today, what I worry about is will the United States accept a currency world that is dominated by China? Will they accept that peacefully, or do we run the risk of military conflict?
Well, Adrian, you have a remarkable understanding of history and insight. And yes, what you just said, everything you said is accurate and correct. And the world has had wars for many, many centuries. There's a study recently that showed that the US, which has been around since 1776, has been at war nearly every year except, I think, 18 of those years. For some reason, the people in Washington like war. I don't, but they seem to like it. So I am afraid that since the world has always had war, especially when transition is taking place, there's going to be more. And probably, well, history shows that when you have a top country and a rising country, they often have had war.
Yeah.
Not always, but usually a war winds up. Do I like that? Of course not. But I am afraid that history shows we need to be careful. And there might be certainly a trade war, if not currency war, economic war. There may well be a shooting war. Do I like it? Of course not. War has never been good for anybody. Even the people who win don't really win. I mean, we won the Second World War. Oh my gosh. What kind of victory was that? It cost us gigantic amounts of money, lives, assets, everything else. So I'm against the war, but human beings, as you wisely point out, have often had a shooting war.
Yeah. I mean, the transition from the pound to the dollar, from Britain to America, was really, as you say, an exception in world history terms. Very much an exception, but it happened peacefully.
But let me just interrupt 1 second, but hold your thought. It was a peaceful, quote, supposedly peaceful, but it wasn't easy and it wasn't fun for most of the world. There were many problems as we moved away from the pound sterling to the US dollar.
Sure. And Britain, of course, as you well remember, Britain went into basically a decade or more of recession and high inflation, ending up with Britain going to the IMF cap in hand, which, who would have thought it? That was not a proud moment for English people. Exchange controls. I remember the first trip I took abroad, 1971, I went down to the post office to get my foreign currency, and I was allowed £100. £100 was the maximum you could exchange and take out of the country.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, it wasn't fun. I mean, but most people, I was actually a student in Britain during that time, and it was a disaster. Oh my gosh. I can only take 2 and 6 for the weekend. It was such a huge mess. Now, most people in Britain suffered dramatically. Obviously not I mean, the Beatles did okay during that whole transition, but most people suffered very badly, as you wisely point out.
Yeah.
But I think we're all,
sorry.
Go ahead. I was going to say, I think we're all under the belief that the dollar will be replaced at some point, whether it be with a currency or a basket of currencies and commodities or something that may be peaceful, that may not be peaceful. I don't think what most Americans understand at this point, because I don't see the fervor to save the dollar, to get Congress to do the right thing. I don't see the clamor, if you will. I don't think a lot of people realize what that impact is going to have. And you just described what happened to Britain. I see the same thing happening here. If you were the world's reserve and then you are no longer the world's reserve, your standard of living is absolutely going to plummet. And I don't think people realize what's coming.
Well, people don't
would think,
anymore.
people would look at you, Richard, and say, "What are you talking about? We're the United States of
my wife says
we're the United States of America."
Yeah.
Just like they said in Britain in the 1920s or 30s.
It's a
you
good
know.
point.
Right. I was going to say, Rich, we might want to pivot to commodities.
Yeah, I think
You want to
there's
start
there's
on
some
that?
questions out there. I know I want to get Jim's opinion on gold and gold stocks and potentially silver. He talked a little bit about that, but I know there's some questions out there about uranium as well. So where do we want to go first, Adrian?
Well, Jim, why don't you just tell us what your outlook for commodities is right now, broadly? Are there preferred commodities now?
Well, as I said before, the only asset that I know that is cheap on a historic basis now is commodities. I mean, silver is down 60%. That's not a bubble when something is down 60% from its all-time high. And that's true of many commodities. But if you don't understand commodities, please don't invest in any commodity. But I do own gold. I've owned gold for many decades. I've never sold any gold, never sold any silver, and I'm planning to buy more. The thing about gold and silver, as you all know, is throughout history, first, Rich, I'm an old peasant, and us old peasants know that when things go wrong, we want to have some gold under the bed. We
Amen.
want some silver in the closet. And you can poo-poo it all day long, but throughout history, us old peasants all know that gold and silver will be okay. And they can make you rich if you buy them right, if your timing is any good.
That's only been for 5,000 years, though.
I know. Well, that's long enough for me. My bed's not going to be
That'll
around.
cover all of our lifespans, right?
Yeah, it's certainly going to cover mine. I hope it does anyway. And I don't see anything else. I mean, as I said, if you look at rice or nearly everything, they're all down a lot from their all-time high. That doesn't mean you should buy them, but Microsoft is not down from its all-time high. All of these stocks are very high. Bonds have never been this expensive in world history. So I don't see anything else except commodities at the moment that are cheap enough for me to buy more. It doesn't mean I'll make money, doesn't mean that anybody should buy them, but I don't see anything else in the world scenario or the world scene that's cheap.
And what about some of the stocks of the miners, the copper miners, gold miners?
Well, Adrian, you remember Mark Twain?
Yeah.
Mark Twain once said, the definition of a gold mine is a hole in the ground with a liar standing at the top. Mr. Twain lost a lot of money in a gold mine, obviously. Sure. If you know a company that's going to find gold in Berlin, buy all you can and then send me an email. Yes. If you know what you're doing and if you know mining and assets, sure, buy it. The problem is there are hundreds of gold mines in the world, hundreds of silver mines, and many of them will not work. But if you know it, do it. I prefer the real stuff, gold and silver, just because I know it's real. And I know that if I need to cross a border one night, the border guard is going to know what gold and silver is. He's not going to know what my shares of Anglo-American are. He will never have heard of Anglo-American or shares. But if you show him a silver coin, he knows what it is.
Okay, well, with gold and silver, you can buy the physical. What with the others, agricultural commodities, for example, which you mentioned, you do that through futures, or how do you favor investing in things?
Well,
like
the best way is to go buy some land and become a farmer. Oh my gosh, you'll get rich if you know what you're doing. But I'm not going to become a farmer. I'm too lazy and incompetent. But there are many ways to do it. Buy futures, buy shares. John Deere benefits if agriculture does well. I don't own John Deere. I'm just using it as an example. There are many ways to invest in everything, especially commodities, and including futures. If you're good at futures, you can be rich in an afternoon. You can be bankrupt in an afternoon also, if you don't know what you're doing. But there are many ways to do it.
So there's a big movement, you may have noticed, for green energy out there, and it's funded by all these programs with, kickbacks from the government, and most of them are unprofitable and can't achieve the goals they're looking to achieve to replace dinosaur juice or fossil fuels. But that being said, everybody's down on fossil fuels. Well, not everybody, but a good number of people, and certainly the government is down on fossil fuels, which kind of built this country and brought us to the level of success we're at today. Um, do you think there's a future in fossil fuels? Do you think people realize that green energy may not be the answer for generations? And two, are we overlooking uranium as one of the best clean options out there?
Well, we're certainly ignoring fossil fuel. Many people are. No others. There are people still making fortunes in fossil fuels. I own some myself. It is not going to disappear this afternoon. I'm sitting in Singapore in Asia, and I look out the window. I don't see any windmills on every building. So there's still a way that I see some solar panels, but not that many, very few, in fact. So yes, fossil fuels are under stress, but as you point out, fossil fuels, not just America, fossil fuels built the world as we know it, and will continue to have a place in the world economy, at least in my lifetime. And I suspect that's going to be true for everybody. Maybe someday we'll look out the window and we'll see windmills and solar panels everywhere, but that's not going to happen soon. There are certainly problems with some of the alternatives. They're not efficient. They're not economically competitive, not yet, but most of them, they have to have subsidies or something from the government. So yes, we all want clean energy. We all want clean air. I do anyway, and I'm sure you do too, but it's not that easy and not that efficient and not that competitive yet.
So do you think it's uranium's time right now?
Well, I have a position in uranium. I know that uranium is clean if you do it right. If you do it wrong, it's not very clean. It'll ruin you. It'll destroy you. But no, uranium is cheaper, more efficient than most energy sources. So yes, I own uranium. If you say the word uranium, people leave the room.
I was
Many
going to say, is
people
that
leave the
stigma
room.
still there, though? That's the issue.
Yeah, I mean, they think you're unclean if you can even spell uranium. But I know it has a viable place. The Chinese don't leave the room. The French don't leave the room. Many people use, and I don't know if they admire it, but they certainly use it, and they know the necessity.
Adrian?
We've got an interesting question here from Eric. Hi, Eric. Eric is wondering about the cooking of numbers, the CPI, how accurate it is, of a retraction of job creation numbers, which I don't know how closely you follow that, Jim, but we have a big beat in the jobs numbers. And so all the newspapers have the headline about, more jobs created than we thought. And then they revise downwards the last month and the month before. So in fact, on balance over 3 months, there's hardly any change. But the headline is still, December's job numbers increased more than expected. So do you have any particular view on that?
Well, I have learned not to get my investment advice from the U.S., from any government. I know that most of the numbers are made up. At best, they're made up. Often they're outright lies. And I'm not talking about just the U.S., everybody. I mean, there was a time, once upon a time, when even the Germans, everybody found out that even the Germans were cooking the numbers. So every government has had episodes of false numbers, fake numbers in history. And I have learned I have to pay attention to the numbers because everybody else does, but I have learned to be very, very skeptical. whatever the numbers are that come from, not just from governments, but especially governments. Even companies, as you well know, many companies fake the numbers too. So
Sure.
everybody has a tendency. Everybody wants good news.
Yeah.
By the way, Adrian, I want good news too, but I have to make sure it's legitimate good news.
Yeah. So I was you were commenting about the fact that everybody makes up some numbers, especially in election year. Maybe that's what's motivating Miss Yellen here. I'm not sure with her comments last Friday. Got to make sure the news is good so we can get out to the vote or the polls and vote early and often. There was we were talking about agriculture. There was one question here from Aiden. He says, with fertilizer prices dropping to nearly 3-year low, what are your thoughts on large fertilizer companies such as Nutrien, which stock price dropped significantly from its all-time highs? So it's kind of in that sector. Any thoughts on fertilizer companies?
Well, that's a very good insight. And if I weren't so lazy, I would be more up to date on fertilizer. But that is has been at times in history, an extremely good way to invest in commodities or agriculture or whatever. So yes, if he is knowledgeable and if he's on top of things, he can probably find good opportunities. I'm glad he reminded me. Now I'll have to do some homework because at times in history, or investing history, fertilizer has been a phenomenal way to make money or to lose money.
Yeah, and we see the impact of that in Ukraine as well, right? That's put a real damper in that market for sure.
Well, Ukraine and Russia are both huge agricultural nations and have been for decades. So when you think of Ukraine, don't remember Russia's in this war too, and they have a huge impact on agriculture and fertilizer and many other things. And I'm just not up to date enough to know.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Can I step back a little? Did you have another question on?
No.
Let me step back a little bit, Jim. Obviously, you've got a wealth of experience. If you were starting out today, but you had the knowledge that you had gained over the last 20 or 30 or 40 years, what are some of the major lessons you've learned? How would you do things differently today if you were just starting out?
Well, one of the major lessons I have learned is the markets are extremely complicated and there's a lot that I don't know, no matter how smart I think I am. And even if I'm smart, I can, once in my career, there was a time when I tripled my money in like 6 months when everybody around me was going broke, bankrupt, out of business. And yet, 6 months later, I lost everything. I thought I was really, really smart. And I had been. But what I learned was there was a lot about the markets that I did not know, that I had to learn. And so I guess the main lesson I would try to pound into everybody is, no matter how smart you are and how knowledgeable you are, there's a lot you haven't looked at yet. Be careful, because there's something that I was once short oil in the late 80s, and it was an absolutely well thought out and well researched position. But that weekend, Iran and Iraq went to war. Needless to say, being short oil was not a good position. Now you can say, oh, that was bad luck. No. Somebody knew that there was a war coming. Somebody knew that two gigantic armies were moving towards war. I will tell you, I didn't know because I hadn't done enough research. And there's always something that you better check, no matter how remote you think it is, because it could hit you in the back of the head and cost you money.
Yeah. Well, what are your general thoughts about when a position goes against you? How much time do you give it? Obviously, it's different for different positions, but can you talk a little bit about that? Do you use stop losses, for example, on equity positions?
Adrian, it's a brilliant question. I do not use stop losses. Most of the time, I wish I had, especially when something goes against me. Many people I know do use stop losses and use them well, and they have certainly a good position for any investor. I am just either not smart enough or too lazy or something. But yes, one does. And every time something goes against me, of course, I think a lot about it because I wonder what I have done wrong and what do I do next. And maybe stop loss is the answer. It has not been for me because I'm lazy. Often it would have been good had I had stop losses, but what I do, for better or for worse, is when it goes against me, I focus and concentrate and try to find out what is really the story and what have I done wrong. And often I just finally give up and cover it a loss when it's clear that I have no choice and I've made a mistake. Sorry, excuse me.
Pleasure.
I wish we had an answer. I wish I had a good answer for that. I don't.
Well, just to clarify, I don't often use stop losses either. I'm not a big fan of stop losses for various reasons. And, you know, this isn't a webinar about me, so I won't go into it. But just to clarify, I don't use stop losses much. But I just wondered, you know, I know some people who, as soon as something goes against them, they like to get out immediately. You know, there's some people who double down if they think they know the position well enough. So I guess there's no one answer, and there's certainly no one answer for every position that you take. But I do exactly what you do. If something starts to go against me, I just really spend more time focusing on it and saying, what am I missing here? Because either everyone else is wrong, the market's wrong, or I'm wrong. And it might be the market's wrong. That sometimes happens. But it's time to really focus and say, what am I missing? Is there something I'm missing in this story?
Well,
I wish you would come up for a solution for all of us when we make mistakes. I don't have a good answer yet, except what you do. I do more and more research to find out how could the market be so wrong when in fact I'm the one that's wrong.
Right.
Jim, there's I read a lot, and I'm seeing two distinct camps come out of late. One is absolutely there is a need to diversify your portfolio. Therefore, you have the best path to success because you're not going to lose it all, and then have to start from scratch. And then there's the other camp that says that's not how you make money. The way you make money is you find the very best opportunities out there and you go after one or two or three of them, as opposed to diversifying your portfolio. Where do you stand there? You know, are you a fan of, you know, position size and keeping things small to minimize the damage and, you know, manage risk, or are you focusing on the prize and trusting your research to make yourself wealthy?
Well, my experience is that diversification will not make you rich. Diversification is something that brokers came up with so that they wouldn't get sued. You know, they can say, well, you have a diversified portfolio. How can you blame me? If you want to get rich, you focus, you concentrate, you put all your eggs in one basket, and you watch that basket very, very carefully. You got to have the right basket, or you're going to go bankrupt quickly. But if you want to be rich, I mean, Henry Ford didn't diversify, not in the beginning anyway. You know, Henry Ford, Thomas Watson at IBM didn't diversify, put all his eggs in one basket and got extremely rich. Now, many people have done that and gone broke, bankrupt quickly. But if you want to be rich, the way to do it is to concentrate, focus, and be sure you're at the right place. That's not easy. I didn't say it was easy getting rich. I'm just saying that's how to do it.
So in that,
sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Adrian.
I was just going to say this, we all know this, but it's worth stating. There's obviously a huge difference between a 25-year-old guy that's just, or guy or gal who's just got a job, just starting to earn money and wants to use equities and investments to build wealth over 40 years. On the one hand, and on the other hand, someone who's 70 or 80 who's already made wealth and is really wanting to preserve it.
And don't have the time to start over either.
Yeah, there's a huge difference in the way those two people should handle things. We all know that, but I think it's worth mentioning. And
Well, yes, there's a difference in a 25-year-old and a 70-year-old.
yeah,
I'm neither, but I remember. I remember the differences.
you remember both? Do you remember being 20?
That's revealing.
Uh,
I
um,
remember that it's never been easy. Never been easy for me anyway. I remember that I still see people who talk about, who will say things like, gosh, in the old days, it was so much easier. And my response is, it was never easy for me. Yes, I had some success, but it was never easy and it never will be.
right. No, I agree with that. People who think it's easy, I always say to them, watch out, watch out.
Be careful.
Yeah, yeah. I want, Rich, did you have a question there?
I was going to ask, follow up to the diversification question. So, I'm kind of jumping back to my world because I'm interested in your opinion about gold and silver. You said you had both. You said you bought both and you never sold either one of them. I've always looked at silver as more as a potential for profit, because of its ability to follow gold after lagging from a deeper low and shoot to a higher high. I've always looked at gold as wealth insurance. That's basically a store of purchasing power for the future, cryogenically freezing your purchasing power now in gold for use in the future and worth less dollars or worth less euro or whatever. I'm just wondering how you look at the two of them since you don't sell either one of them. Um, and and
Well,
then and then on the diversification part, where does that fit in? Is that just kind of a safety blanket, small allocation in case things go wrong in the equity side or your investment side?
Well, in my view, everybody should own some gold and silver for insurance, as you mentioned, if nothing else. Everybody should have some. And in my view, at times, depending on the price and the circumstances, I mean, right now, gold is down, silver is down 60% from its all-time high. Gold is near its all-time high. So I would prefer silver today to gold. I'm not buying either at the moment, but I would prefer silver based on the price, based purely on the price.
Yeah.
Both have been extremely important in world. In fact, in some parts of Africa, they still use silver. If you go through parts of East Africa, they still use old Austrian silver coins. Maria Theresa. You remember Maria Theresa? She was around a long time, but they still have coins that she issued 200 or 300 years ago, because silver is still extremely useful in many parts of the world. In fact, the U.S., when we started out, we were on the silver standard. The Monetary Act of 1792 or whatever it was, the U.S. dollar was based on silver for 100 years. Then there was a huge situation where we changed because the world was using gold, but silver and gold have both been extremely important in world history. Both will continue to be, as I read history anyway. So at the moment, I would buy silver rather than gold, but I own both. Don't plan to sell either. I hope that my children someday will be delighted when they find a lot of gold and silver in their portfolio.
They should
Jim,
be.
you're not buying gold or silver now, is that just specific personal circumstances, or are there any market factors that are holding you back right now?
Probably because I'm lazy. No, as I said, gold is near its all-time high. Maybe it's a perfect time to buy, but I usually don't like buying things at all-time highs. But I own plenty of gold, Adrian. Don't think I don't have any gold. And likewise, silver. It's just that I'm not doing anything right now. I prefer, I don't get it right always, but I prefer to buy when everybody's throwing gold out the window. When they say, I'm never going to buy gold again. I hope that happens again. It has happened often. I hope I'm smart enough to buy again.
Well, I think that was last year.
I was just going to say that, exactly what I was going to say. I think I heard that last year.
Yeah, yeah.
And you know what? I hope we'll hear it again.
Yeah. Well, I don't know the answer, Jim. Obviously, we deal with this all the time. I hear that a lot, that gold is at all-time highs and therefore it's expensive. And I don't know that you're saying that. I think you're just saying you're not looking at it there. But I really think after what, 4+ years of consolidation right around 2000, I think we're ready for the next leg up, not the end of the previous leg. But time will tell, and we'll see.
Do it your way. That's the only way you're going to be successful, Richard. I'm just saying that if I were buying either right now, I would buy silver on price action,
I can't
price
argue with that at
relativity
all.
alone.
Yeah, I can't argue with that at all.
So when we're talking, you talk about assets that are at all-time highs. Obviously, the US stock market and most of the developed world markets are at all-time highs. We haven't really talked much about the stock market. How are you viewing the US and major developed markets right now?
Well, I think it's accurate to say I don't own shares in most of them. I had Japanese shares, a lot, which I bought surprisingly well, but I sold them a week or two ago. I would suspect of all the major markets, Japan is probably the most attractive. I repeat, yes, I sold badly, but the Japanese market made its all-time high. And over 30 years ago, it's not a typo, over 30 years ago at 40,000, it's now about 30-odd thousand. I would suspect it's going to go back to an all-time high for many reasons, even though I sold. That's one of the reasons it will go to a high, because I sold. But I would say that the Japanese market is the only major market in the world that I would see as attractive at the moment. And I do not, as I say, I sold mine badly.
Yeah, yeah. And I guess with them beginning to end yield control, I mean, slowly, they're doing everything incredibly slowly there, but, beginning to move away from yield control, that should see the yen appreciate. The yen appreciating should see, the way I'm viewing it, should see some of the Japanese institutional money that was put abroad come back to Japan, invest in, so that'll support the yen and it'll support the stock market. So yeah, I tend to agree with you. You mentioned you're not shorting. What are some of the signals you look for, before you start to short individuals? Do you short individual stocks or whole markets? And what are some of the signals you look for?
I've always done both. Now I'm a little lazier than before, or shorting indexes is an easy way to do things. Obviously, the best way is to short the 3 or 4 or 5 that are going to go down the most. But if you're lazy, if you cannot do that, just short the indexes. Index investing is good for many people, but I'm not doing either at the moment. I hope that I'm smart enough. When all the signs that have been around for hundreds of years, when everybody is buying shares, when people are leaving their jobs to go into the investing world, when it's on everybody's, when you go to the dentist and the receptionist wants to talk to you about stocks. I mean, this has happened many times, at least in my lifetime, and certainly in world history. We're not to that stage yet. We're getting there, obviously. And I hope I'm smart enough to recognize when it happens. And if I get it right, I would probably short the whatever they are, the Magnificent Seven in the US, because those are the stocks that are the most overexploited. And historically, if you find things that were overexploited, have been overexploited, that's the place to start short. But we'll see. I don't know.
So what you'd look for is a sort of anecdotal evidence.
Yes, but anecdotal evidence has to be backed up by facts. Usually, of course, the anecdotal evidence is backed up by facts. Right now, there's seven stocks in the US that always go up. That's not just anecdotal, that's a fact.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting what you say, because I mean, I remember in the .com bubble, you're absolutely right. I mean, everyone was trying to give you stock tips. You'd get a taxi and the taxi driver had a stock tip, and the proverbial shoeshine boy had a stock tip for you. And I'm not sensing that today yet. I'm not. You go out with people and how hot the stock is and what stock they bought last week that's doubled. That's not the topic of conversation today, as it was in 2000, or indeed as housing was in 2006-7. 2006-7, everyone was quitting their job to start, buying houses, and you're not seeing that at the moment.
You see, Richard, Adrian's been around. He's old. He knows how this works.
I listen to him, listening to you as well.
He's experienced it.
Prefer the word experienced.
Yes, yes.
Well, experience is the fool's best teacher. I'm not the first one to say that, but I certainly have learned a lot from experience, bad experience.
Speaking of experiences, I know, Adrian, this is something you wanted to get out there. There's an experience going on right now in the Paris of South America, Argentina. And a lot of people feel this is a very interesting experiment where, people actually chose to make their government smaller. What are your thoughts about what's going on in Argentina right now?
Well, I've known and invested in Argentina more than once in the last 30 or 40, 50 years. Argentina has had extremely successful periods before. Unfortunately, they've never lasted. Something always goes wrong, at least always has. Now, I read the same thing you do. It looks remarkable. It looks amazing. And if they mean it, and they do mean it, but if they can continue it, if they can, it's going to be great. My problem is I've seen this, I've been to this rodeo before.
The thing that strikes me is, I think back a couple elections ago when Trump came in and he said he was going to clean out the swamp and do all this stuff. He was going to cut all these programs, and not a lot of that materialized. Now, granted, he didn't have a lot of help. I don't know if he needed it or not, but Milei is coming in, and what did he have? The number of cabinets in like the first few days, and got rid of all these. He just fired people left and right and cleared house. And I always joke the best way to fix Washington is just get a couple bulldozers, and we'll fix things real well. And it seems to be that's what he's doing there. And I'm surprised he's still talking about it.
Well, I read the same thing, and it's wonderful and remarkable. My only problem, as I said, to repeat myself, I've seen it happen many times in Argentina. 150 years ago, people who immigrated from Europe, many of them went to Argentina. There were two choices, the U.S. and Argentina. Obviously, the ones who got it right went to the U.S., but many went to Argentina, and that has happened many times in the past 150 years. And for whatever reason, Argentina has never sustained it. There was a time 100 years ago, if you were in Paris and you would see somebody who was really rich, the expression was, oh, he is as rich as an Argentine.
Yeah.
Because they were so rich everywhere and everybody knew it. Well, it didn't last, unfortunately. But if it's going to last this time, they're saying the right things and doing the right things. And I have not invested because I'm lazy or for whatever reason. But no, it will be fantastic for them and for the world.
Yeah. Adrian, your thoughts?
No. I mean, I agree completely. The biggest stumbling block is, as you just mentioned, Jim. I mean, he doesn't have Congress with him. He doesn't have the courts with him. He doesn't have the media with him. So, everything he does is going to be an uphill battle. That's, and as if you follow it, as the courts have just struck down his labor reforms. So it's going to be a struggle, but at least at the moment, his heart's in the right place. He's trying the right things. Argentina is a beautiful country, and it's got great natural resources. As you say, 120 years ago, it was the fourth largest economy in the world. And the wealth, I remember I've heard that expression, as wealthy as an Argentine, but it also had an incredibly wealthy and broad middle class. It wasn't just a handful of oligarchs that were wealthy. So it's a tragedy what's happened there over the last 100 years. But anyway, I wish him luck. Yeah.
Well, he has the three of us supporting him, but I'm afraid he's going to need more than the three of us.
No
Yeah.
kidding. No kidding. He's going to need gas for that chainsaw. So,
Yeah. Rich, are you looking at the questions that are coming in?
I was, and I think we've covered most of them. We've missed a couple. I think we covered this one, but tell me if we didn't. Jim, do you foresee the BRICS adopting a gold-backed currency at some point in this decade? I think we kind of covered around that. I don't know if we answered that directly.
Well, my answer is no, but if there's a sudden emergency and people don't know what to do, they may grab for gold, they may grab for silver, but I doubt it. And as I said before, the problem with gold is it's wonderful. It requires discipline, but nobody wants discipline. No politician anyway wants discipline. And the Brits that's not a real force. It's just something that some guy once looked at the map and said, oh, look at those big countries. Let's call them BRICS, or let's call them a force. They have never been a force. They're not a force now. Nothing to unify them. Maybe they will in an emergency, but I don't suspect that that's going to last.
Right. Someone asked a really interesting question. This has changed the subject a little bit, but Ed Ball asks, what do you like least about living in Singapore?
What do I like least about what?
Living in Singapore.
Oh, that's a good question. Singapore is a remarkably efficient and successful country over the past 50 or 60 years, perhaps the most successful country in the world in the last 50 or 60 years. I cannot think of anything I don't like about Singapore. It's it's what?
The humidity?
Well, I have not suffered or felt any loss of liberty in Singapore.
Humidity.
Oh. But I have suffered humidity in Singapore. But Adrian, I grew up in Alabama. I know about hot weather and humid weather.
Bad.
I mean, this is not new for me. This is just like my youth, my childhood. No, I mean, in Singapore, it's always hot and raining. And if it's raining, it's going to stop soon. So no, I'm sure that there are many things that I don't like about Singapore, but whatever they are, they're not strong enough or powerful enough to make me complain about it. Yes, I mean, if you travel, the airport is extremely efficient and fast. The old man who founded Singapore said they got to be in the taxi within 20 minutes after they land. That means everything. And it's true. It's amazing. You in New York, you're still trying to find the gate after 20 minutes. I don't know if you know how inefficient American airports are. No, as far as I'm concerned, I've had a good time living in Singapore. My kids are very keen. They go to government schools, public schools, and they're very keen. If your kids are keen, you're usually keen. And my wife is keen. If your wife and kids are keen, you're probably keen too.
Right. No, you just mentioned something about New York. It's astonishing, when I first started traveling, a lot after you, of course, and not as often as you, but when I first started traveling to Asia, it was always culture shock to come back to the US. You land at Kennedy Airport and you have to squeeze yourself into some yellow cab. Where's the high speed, where's the high speed railway into town? Et cetera, et cetera. I say to people, you go to Kuala Lumpur, the highways are better than the highways in Los Angeles or in New York or in Washington. And you could just go on and on and on. But people who don't travel, I think, don't really realize that.
Well, I'm keen to be an American, but you're exactly right. Your description of American airports is appalling compared to many airports in the world. Now,
Yeah.
there are very bad airports in the world too, but many of them are extremely efficient. Ours are not.
Gotcha. I want to switch gears here a little bit, if I could, Adrian. There's a couple questions that are exactly the same. And I don't know if you have any thoughts on this, Jim, but where do you stand on cryptocurrency?
Well, many people I know are trading cryptos, have been. Some people have made a lot of money trading cryptos. I have never bought nor sold any cryptocurrency, but as trading vehicles, some people have been successful. Now, as you know, Rich, many of them have already disappeared and gone to zero.
Yes.
We all read about the success stories.
Money heaven, yeah.
But there are lots of huge failures in the crypto world. I have never bought nor sold either. I don't see any reason for them except trading vehicles. I have nothing against trading vehicles. I'm not a trader, so I don't use them, but I don't see any value at all in cryptocurrencies except as trading vehicles, and many of those have already disappeared. So it's not for me. I don't think they're going to become the new currencies. The bulls, the optimists say they are. I don't see that the U.S. government is ever going to say, okay, guys, this is the U.S. The U.S. is everybody's trying to change its money to computer money, especially the U.S. And someday it'll all be on computer, but I don't see the U.S. saying, okay, this is the money now, it's all on the computer. But if you want to use that money, you can use that money too. That's not the way bureaucrats work. That's not the way governments work.
There's no control there.
Right.
They want control. You're exactly right. They want monopoly and control.
All right.
But if you want to trade them, go to it. Have fun. I'm not going to trade them, but if you can and do and you make money, hooray.
Yeah, I bought a little bit on a lark. I was on an investment conference from 2015 in Zurich. A friend of mine said we're going to go out and visit a friend in Zug, and we went to a place called Bitcoin AG. And this guy was apparently a Danish pirate who runs this company, had an affinity for $20 Saints. So I talked a little bit to him about that. And he said, yeah, I've got Bitcoin. And he handed me some on a piece of paper. I bought it at like $2,300 Bitcoin at that time. And I just held on to it for years. I didn't even know what the hell I had or if it was real or if I just wasted all my money. And then somebody had me open it up and actually have some Bitcoin, but I don't know what the hell to do with it. So I'm just holding it.
Well, you're smarter than I am. Even if somebody said, oh, actually, people did say things like that to me, but I was foolish enough not to buy them.
Yeah.
So, and I may still be foolish, and my money can still go to money heaven.
Well,
It's not off the table.
Fortunately for you, you're more foolish than me.
Thank you.
As we're coming up on an hour and a half as we wrap it up, I'm just wondering, Jim, if you have any words of wisdom, as it were. I keep coming back to this, but any words of wisdom to impart to people, a final advice to give people?
Well, I don't know if it's wisdom, but I will tell you that I know that in the foreseeable future, the world's going to have a big problem in markets. We always have throughout history, and I know it's coming again. I'm not sure when. I guess I should listen to you guys to find out when, but I know it's coming. So my word of wisdom to everybody is be extremely worried. And if you're worried, you will become knowledgeable. And if you will become knowledgeable, you might take action and you might survive it. Many people are not going to survive what's coming next because you remember 2008, it was horrible because of too much debt. Well, Adrian, Richard, you know that since 2009, the debt everywhere has gone up by huge amounts. Even China has a lot of debt. China saved the world helped save the world in 2008. Since then, even China has staggering amounts of debt. So the next time we have a problem, it's probably going to be the worst in my lifetime. So I would urge everybody to become knowledgeable, and then they will become prepared, and they will do fine. They might even make a lot of money. But everybody should be very worried because the next time we have a problem, it's going to be extremely bad.
Yeah, yeah. Well, complacency is definitely an evil. It's the enemy of good investing, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Jim, I don't know, where can people follow you? Are you on Twitter or
Well, Adrian, I don't have anything to sell. I've written some books, but that was a while back. I don't have any. I'm on the internet. I mean, the two of you, I would much looking forward to being interviewed by the two of you. But other than things like that, you can't find me. I live in Singapore, but I'm not going to take you to lunch if you come to Singapore to see me. So I don't have anything. I'm afraid I'm just a simple person.
well, I know your books on investing. I would still recommend to people who haven't read them. Just first-class books. Obviously, Investment Biker was one. I remember the name. I'm not good at names.
Street Smarts, Adventure Capitalist. The list
Hooray, hooray. Yes, everybody should go out and buy as many of my books as they can.
Amen.
Yes. But that's all. I mean, I don't have anything to sell, I'm afraid.
Okay. Rich?
The only thing I would say is, I do think now's a good time to be looking at gold and silver. I can't argue with Jim. Silver is a screaming buy here. It always lags gold, and it seems to be doing it in spades this time around. If you haven't moved that direction, I think your window is going to start closing here in 2024. I think silver's about ready to run. It sure looks like there's a lot of pent-up energy. And I just want to say thank you, Jim, for taking the time. Especially since you have nothing to sell, and yet you've been so free with your time, your experience, your wisdom for us and everybody listening. We thank you from the bottom of our heart for spending some time with us here today. And I hope we can do it again sometime in the future and actually get to see that face of yours as well. But we know it was you.
Yeah.
But I'd be keen to do it again sometime if you want to. But just one quick correction, slight correction. Silver at times has done much better than gold. Silver has outperformed gold in huge amounts. I mean, I don't know if you remember the Hunt brothers, but when the Hunt brothers were around, silver was wildly outperforming gold. They both did well, but there have been times.
Last bull market it did as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, there have been, and there will probably, I hope there will be again, times when silver does better than gold. I hope they don't do. I own both, so I hope both do well.
Amen. I'm with you there.
Well, and thank you very much, Jim. Say hi to your family from me, please.
Well, I'm delighted to see you again, Adrian. It's been a long time. You still look exactly the same. If I didn't know who you were, I would say, gosh, that's Adrian Day. And it is. Hooray.
Well, Adrian, how can people reach you? Because you do sell something. You sell incredible asset management service, and I think people should take advantage of that. If I could say that on the air.
It's adriandayassetmanagement.com, and we've got interviews and so on the site.
Wonderful. And for everybody listening, we're going to come out with a full recap email as we always do. So everybody that registered is going to get a copy of this full interview, so you can come back to it and dig into parts of it if you want. Along with that email, we'll give ways to contact Adrian and contact ASI. And I just want to encourage everybody, we already know who our next guest is. Like I said, we're going to have 6 times we're going to get together this year. Our next guest is, should I say Lobo Tigre or Lewis James? Which way should I go there?
Lobo Tigre.
Lobo Tigre is going to be our guest. It's going to be at the end of March. Do you remember the exact date, Adrian? I know it's like the 28th or something like that, but we'll put it in the email that goes out tomorrow. We're really looking forward to him as well. And once again, Adrian, thank you. Jim, thank you so much for being with us here today. Happy New Year to all.
Thank both of you. I hope we do it again sometime.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you.
Be careful. Be very careful.
That
Thank
is the
you.
message. Thank
Okay.
you, sir.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
I guess those were the parting words of wisdom. Be careful.
Amen.
Yeah.
All
Okay.
right. Thank you all.